I have a very interesting guest joining us today. His name is Anebi Agbo, Director of Product at ULedger. We're going to have an interesting conversation today about blockchain, about how a traditional product-led sales motion is being transitioned over to a PLG motion at ULedger. What are some of the challenges associated with that shift? What type of data you need to enable that shift? How do you go about making that change across your team, your organization, and some of the challenges that come along with making that transition? So if you're joining us live today, feel free to ask your questions and post them in the chat session. If you're joining us via a webinar or podcast and like to reach out to us, you can find us at asim@immersa.co or on our website. You can reach out to us at www.immersa.ai. All right, let me pass this on to Anebi. Anebi, feel free to introduce yourself. Love to hear a little bit of your story.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a pleasure to be with the crew today. So I lead product at ULedger at the moment. ULedger is a blockchain company, blockchain startup building solutions for businesses. And my journey has been very non-traditional. My foray into the product space, and now blockchain. I started off as a developer over 10 years ago, building SQL, SQL, data analytics pipelines, and all that fun stuff. And over the years, I like to say, product found me. I didn't find product. I found myself prioritizing backlogs, working with executive teams to figure out strategy for our products, and it's been an interesting journey for sure. And here I am today, focused primarily on blockchain for small to mid-sized businesses and enterprises.
Great. So let's talk about ULedger in just a moment. I first want to get to know a little bit more of your journey. So you mentioned to me in our last discussion that you were previously doing some work for Dell and Microsoft and others. So maybe take a little bit of a moment to sort of describe what are your kind of key areas of interest as a product leader? What types of work, based on the work that you've done in the past?
So a lot of my work in the past has been very data-centric, data-heavy. I gravitate towards the data because, right, on the one hand, the data does not lie, but it can, right? It's garbage in, garbage out. So I really focus there, and a lot of the roles I've had have had some kind of thing to do with data analytics. So when I started as a, database developers, writing code for databases, setting up tables. But quickly found myself getting into more predictive analytics, machine learning, with the different teams I was working on. I got into consulting because I was just telling someone the other day, right? In consulting, I feel like you can compress a huge amount of work in a short amount of time. You don't have the liberty to onboard in 6 months or whatever. You're hitting the ground running to add value. And that was what I did with Dell. That's what I did with Microsoft. Consulting in the data space, and been very interesting. With Microsoft, I helped build out AI use cases with customers, just seeing how customers were deploying AI, and also giving some ideas both ways, right, to Microsoft on how the AI offerings could better serve the customers, and also to the customers on how they could better leverage the AI capabilities that Microsoft continues to roll out via the Power Platform.
That's fantastic. And we love, I think, people that use data to understand their customers and how to run their business. We call them datapreneurs. So definitely love talking to people who come from that kind of a mindset. Tell us a little bit more about ULedger and blockchain. I mean, blockchain, for those of us who are dialing in and listening to this that are non-technical, how would you explain what that is?
Well, that's a good one. So blockchain, on the one hand, right, I'll start with blockchain. So blockchain technology has been around for quite a while, but I think a lot more people started looking into that. Bitcoin, for example, runs on blockchain. Many times blockchain is seen as synonymous with cryptocurrency. Yeah. But what a lot of people don't know is it powers so many other use cases, real-time transactions, right? Real-time analytics, verifying authenticity for items, supply chain traceability and visibility. The list goes on for the many use cases of blockchain. And blockchain, right, is based on distributed ledger technology, where as transactions are added, it's added for each previous block before it. It tends to be a lot more secure, given that you have so many nodes, right, or computers that have to verify those transactions. So it is no single point of failure for it. So blockchain technology is a core focus for us at ULedger, because we see it as something that will be ubiquitous in years from now. Like databases, for example, started a while ago, and now pretty much every website, application, and everything you build runs on the database. And we see blockchain powering this new vision for the web, Web 3, so a lot call it. So ULedger is building solutions to power the Web 3 space, and by proxy to power a host of businesses. Eventually, the vision is, a blockchain for every individual, again, as ubiquitous as databases are today.
Awesome. So tell us about some of the use cases that ULedger enables for developers using blockchains, and just kind of orient the audience to the business aspects of ULedger.
Yeah, so ULedger has, we have a few streams going, but at the core is a blockchain as a service platform, right? And that makes it, super easy, stupid simple, right? To view your transactions and to run transactions for decentralized applications. So developers can build using our blockchain and using the portal we provide and the interface we provide to push out the applications via our blockchain. We have SDKs, eventually we'll have APIs here to make it a lot easier for developers, right, to utilize our blockchain for their applications.
Awesome. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk about the conversation that we wanted to have today, which is this transition from a product-led sales to, from a traditional sales-led model to a product-led sales model. Can you share a little bit about how and I know the company's sort of gone through some evolution and changes, but maybe talk a little bit about the product-led sales motion and then the sales-led motion and how you're kind of transitioning from the sales-led to the product-led side. Let's just maybe give us the 30,000-foot level view first.
Yeah, so one thing, if you want to, sometimes it's confusing to know whether you're sales-led or product-led. And a good litmus test that I found is if someone needs to call somebody, right, or get on a call or whatever, to talk with a human before using your product, you're sales-led. Now you can argue what percentage, right? And maybe some parts of your product, the self-service. But if someone can go online, right, download your product or via whatever modality to use it and use it themselves, right, that's product-led. And many organizations are not like 100%, but even product-led orgs may still have sales departments and vice versa. So that's a good way to know, does your product need human intervention and do they have to talk with someone? Okay, sales-led. And for us at ULedger, right, that's a process as we move towards being a more product-led org. So having our product be front and center. So hey, taste this pudding, see if you like it, right? And buy the whole thing. And that's what we're working towards right now in maturing to a more product-led organization. And inevitably, my battery is dying. I'm going to plug in real quick. Thought I was
You got it.
But apparently not.
No worries.
That what can go wrong, right?
Well, if you were gone for a little bit longer, I have my set of dad jokes that I use to fill up. But we'll spare the audience of that today. So let me ask you a little bit more on this transition, right? So what prompted the change, right? I mean, obviously these are very different methodologies, and we've had guests on the show that talk about augmenting one approach with the other instead of moving from one to the other. So obviously that's a pretty dramatic shift for any company. Tell us a little bit more about what's prompting that change. What's the realization that led to we should move to a product-led motion?
Yeah, and I want to preface this with it's not a silver bullet, right? Moving to product-led does not automatically make your company scale. Like we have the success stories like Slack, just very product-led, right? And many other companies, even HubSpot, I think, to a certain degree, and the list goes on and on for successful product-led orgs, but they're also successful sales-led orgs. So the question is, how do I know that it's time for me to explore that? And for us in our evolution in this step, one of my favorite words is inflection, right? We're at an interesting inflection point. And for us right now, we're scaling. We're working on scaling, improving our infrastructure. We've made a lot of updates over the past few months or from the past year, and we continue to make more updates. We're making our interfaces a lot more user-friendly and, focusing maniacally on the customer experience. So for us, this is a litmus test for, okay, we've been building for a long time and getting some feedback. How can we now put this in the hands of customers to test it out and we can give us more feedback, which we'll talk about, right? The data aspect of that. So it's almost something you can hang your hat on for. We've been building this. We know it's awesome, or we think it's awesome, but we want more customers to use it for themselves. And then it's going to reduce our acquisition costs, right? So that's another thing I believe to think about when moving to product-led, because product-led, if it works well, you're reducing friction for customers. You're reducing the acquisition cost for customers because finding your product is stupid simple to download or to set up an account and start using it. And also it gives you a lot more data by proxy because more folks, the friction to get into it is a lot less. So more folks can get into it. So those are some considerations for us as we prep to scale. So how can we reach more customers, reduce the barrier for them, the frictions, and provide a seamless experience, hopefully for them to come back for more.
Got it. And Anebi, did you, as a product leader, have to obviously think through what are the changes you need to make from a product standpoint to enable a product-led strategy? Can you share a little bit about that thought process? Like what, from a product strategy standpoint, a roadmap standpoint, what needed to change?
Yeah, so from a product standpoint, and it's a work in progress based on the data we get, but from a product standpoint, had to focus a lot more on user experience fixes, right? Because if you have customers using your product themselves versus, you do a demo, you show them how to use it, you show them the pitfalls, and oh yeah, we know those are problems, we'll fix them. If you really don't have liberty to do that, and really the first experience a customer has beyond the top of the funnel awareness things you have, like content online, videos, blog posts, articles, whatever, if the other next experience they have is actually using a product, right, there's a lot of room there for them to potentially have a bad experience, which you don't want, right? So to move to a product-led motion, absolutely have to focus on the customer experience to make that a lot better. So such that when they're using the product, you don't have more complaints. And then now that's a potential customer who's like, screw this, bad experience, I'm not coming back. So that was a big part of the focus on the roadmap, and still is actually, and will be for a long time, maybe forever. Customer experience and making that a lot more streamlined for our customers.
Awesome, got it. That's great. I'm gonna just direct a few comments to the audience. So I see a few new people have joined. If you have any questions for Anebi, who leads a product at ULedger, feel free to jump in with those questions. I will direct those to him. It's great to see Jeff Gomez, who's one of our customers, and Madeline, who was on this show way back when it helped us got us started, join us today. So welcome to both of you. Coming back to you, Anebi, I'd like to dig a little bit deeper into the data aspects of product-led growth, right? So you mentioned that more than once that the data tells you where to focus your attention to create the right experience, to create the right product. What types of data do you pay attention to? And maybe let's go a little bit in that direction.
Yeah, totally. So there are a lot of tools, right, that help you get data, like telemetry data, usage data, right, where are customers focusing, or users of the product at this point, what are the heat maps? So those are things I look at, especially when you're trying to seed adoption for tools or products you have. And those are the kinds of data I tend to focus on. There a deluge of tools, right? Mixpanel, Amplitude, June.so, so on and so forth, that allow you to collect that level of Datadog's a huge one. Those details, so you could map out your experiences better. So that's a work in progress for us as we try to uniquely understand how our customers are interacting with the tools we provide. Because sometimes we in the product space, and this, you're making a lot of decisions. You're having to make a lot of decisions with not enough data all the time. So you have to make hypotheses. It's a hypothesis, an experiment, but I need to validate that somehow. Customers, I could have a conversation with a customer, can talk with them, and there's a gap between what they say they want, what they need, and what they say they need, right? So those are like quadrant. And then there's also the behavior that they actually do. So many times, I look at it as a series of concentric circles. Because yes, I want to talk with customers and hear their heart, but I also want to see what they're actually doing, and integrating tools into the platform that allows track those behaviors are huge. So now we can overlay what they're saying versus what they are doing, and maybe even see why there's a disparity between the two things, and it could make for an interesting conversation.
Yeah, I love the concentric circle analogy that you just shared, and this idea of what they say versus what they do. And to me, it's always actions speak louder than words.
Yeah.
And so if you can actually measure what they're doing, that gives you a pretty strong signal. So are there certain metrics that you think of and look at when you're thinking about understanding the user behavior in your product? And maybe I'll even zoom out a bit and say, what is the definition of the product in a PLG model? Like, where does it start? Does it start when they first become aware of you as a company? Does it start when they come to your website? Does it start when they log into your product? Does it, like, where do you see the boundary of the product in that experience?
Yeah, depending on who you talk to, you're going to hear different things. But for me, honestly, it's end to end. So now the company is the product, which is weird, which is a weird way to think about it. So every touch point. And again, I love to use this concentric circles analogy because it just works for for everything, right? Again, I see that in a series of circles with so many touch points, and I want to catch as much of that as possible. And at the core of this, right, you almost need like a business engine, or CRM that aggregates a lot of those touch points across different customers, and then I can begin to get a sense for that. So when they first become aware of us via some link on social media or via the website, and all the way to them actually using the core product, right in the circle there, or products, if we have a few different products, and then within that product itself, then okay, all the different touch points they have with that core product, and then measuring that, so I can get a whole per customer, per entity, I can get a full picture. Okay, they became aware of us 2 weeks ago. It took them about 2 weeks to actually come to the website or actually to actually download the product and start using it. And they've been spending an average of 5 minutes per day on the product, right? So that's an interesting journey. It's like, oh, that's interesting. Or maybe last week, such and such a customer, was spending average of 5 minutes, but hey, all of a sudden I see a spike. They're now spending 30 minutes. Interesting. That's a lot more time. Why is that the case? Do we reach out to them? So, and that's why the data is so exciting and so interesting, because it tells a story. And I want to be able to see those stories and work with it.
Yeah, that's awesome. As a example that comes to mind when you were talking, like we met one of our customers that we were working with, pointed out the fact that they see a sudden spike in usage, and then the customer actually leaves them. And it turns out, like we discovered through the analysis, that what's really happening is they're actually downloading their data because they're switching over to another competitor.
Interesting.
And so I want to talk about this idea of business context, right? So data without the context of business is almost meaningless. How do you bring business context? Because, in your example, in your business context, increase in usage is a positive signal. In their example, it's a negative signal. How do you think about business context with these metrics? Like what sort of triggers for you when you think about applying context to the data?
Yeah, and that's another reason again where the more data we have and we can tell a cohesive story around it, the more I think we can apply the business context to it, right? One of the things we're working on is greater cohesion between the different departments, if you will, or units. Business being one of them, business working closely with product, working closely with marketing, working closely with engineering, and other areas. And that's something we have, meetings to figure out the business context, right, for activities you want to drive or actions you want to drive with our product or with our products. And scrumming the business, figuring that out, mapping that out, but also passing those insights back to the business for feedback, because the hypothesis or assumptions we had 2 weeks ago may no longer be the case, or the business needs may have changed. So for us, I think it just belays the point of we need to be joined at the hip and constantly iterating on these and applying business context to it, which changes over time. So you want to be able to update that context once there's new information.
Got it. You mentioned earlier that your customers download your product. Are you a SaaS delivered solution, or are you a on-premise kind of solution, or some hybrid?
Well, when I say download, that's a misstatement, because we're more like SaaS. So you utilize us via the web, so web portal, the login for the developers. So it'd be more of a focus lately on developers. So in that case, they download like an SDK to access our services. Eventually, we will have an app as well. It's something looking into on the roadmap where you can actually download something. But for now, it's a web play for us.
Got it. And in that model, like what tools are you using to understand and analyze the data? Where does the data originate? Like different teams in your organization that are using these different tools, they typically want to see the context, the data in the context of their workflow, their tools. So maybe share a bit of the landscape of the teams, the tools, and how do you converge the data into whatever their flow of work is?
Yeah, so we have different teams, right? So engineering, you have the business side, you have product, business development, marketing, all living in different contexts or silos, if you will. and then trying to bridge the gap there with sync meetings and whatnot. So we use some tools for data. So Datadog, huge part of our solution. If you're playing around with Segment, it helps unify a lot of that data, right? And then HubSpot as a CRM tool that ties it all together as a business management solution. But something we've found is you easily can have tool creep, where, oh my gosh, now I have 1,000 different tools. I mean, we don't have 1,000, but you get the picture. Like, now we have so many different tools, different dashboards everywhere. So it's key to be able to aggregate that and bring that to where people congregate. And that be it in Teams, whether it's team feeds, right, automations to pull a dashboard into Teams, or pull a dashboard into ClickUp and embed it there because people spend a lot of their times there. So that has been key for us, figuring out ways to stitch our disparate tools together, but also to bring it to where people already work, like you said. If I use Teams all day, every day, oh, fantastic. If I can, pulling reports into Teams and view directly in there, then it's one less place to go log into. And then lately, I've been playing around with other tools that let us aggregate feedback, because you get feedback, directly on Teams, via email, via custom forms we have, via the product. So what does it look like to tie that all together? AI obviously has been huge, right, to do that. There are companies like Craftful. Shout out to Craftful. I've been using their product for a while to tie all this feedback together in one single pane of glass.
Got it. Exciting. So in terms of the go-to-market motion, right? You mentioned that you're focusing on developers from a product-led growth standpoint. Are developers also buyers in your context, or is there a different persona that is making the buying decision for your product?
Yeah, and when I say focus on developers, right, it's more so focus on developers to utilize the platform, our SDKs to build, because the idea is that developers, some are solo, but many developers, right, are embedded with organizations. They're hired somewhere. And so as they're using the product, many times it's a business case for what they're looking for, and developers are looking for good solutions that make sense. I mean, if you look at Slack, for example, part of the meteoric growth for Slack is that a lot of developers just found it freaking fantastic, right? I remember friends sharing, oh, have you used Slack? Years ago, I'm like, what's Slack? Now I love Slack. And I've been using it for the past few years. But that's the idea. Think of it like developers as the tip of the spear to experiment with different solutions, see what works, and then bring it in to the mothership, the organization, for wider adoption. So that's just a part of the strategy for us, right? Building a developer portal, building different SDKs and C++ and other languages, right? That would make it a lot easier for developers to, deploy a blockchain, tie the application to the blockchain, utilize nodes, and then, hopefully take that back to the organization, but also focusing on, practical business use cases for a blockchain as a service, and building like blockchain powered solutions for supply chain traceability, for authenticity, for identity. The list goes on. Think of us like a crazy awesome lab building solutions for the Web3 space.
Got it. Exciting. So I'm going to, again, zoom out a little bit to the market side of this, because blockchain as a technology, had a huge hype cycle in the 2021 timeframe, and largely driven by interest in crypto. Clearly, there are a lot of other use cases outside of it. Are there some unique factors that drive those use cases, unique attributes of the blockchain technology that drive those use cases?
And thank you for stating that, because yes, a lot of use cases for blockchain, but I think some unique attributes. The fact that it's a distributed ledger really helps. I mean, if you think about the database technology today, right? And yes, you can have a reasonably secure database, passwords, obviously. Don't use username admin, password admin, right? um, but with databases, I think there are points of failure given due to the centralization of security there. So blockchain technology inherently brings some more security and trust. And one of our taglines is we provide public trust for private data. Right. So it's your data. You're not saying, hey, everyone, look at my data. Now trust me. But we're just, ULedger is just building solutions to say, we're a witness here. Here's a seal of authenticity verified by a blockchain. Zero knowledge. We don't know what is in there, but it's verified, right? There's the handshake. So I think blockchain brings that trust inherently based on how the technology is set up. And then there are also a lot of other applications that it affords you more scale. Because if you think of it, if you think of the tech with a lot of nodes, right, on the blockchain, there's so many other business models you can work on, and that's why it works well for something like supply chain traceability, right? We can see along a supply chain, a product. Okay, I bought this product, and here all the different places it has been to before it got to me, and you can trust that because you know that the data wasn't played around with in any way. We went to a blockchain, it's in there, can't be changed. So there are quite a few things like that inherently, I think, that blockchain provides.
Yeah. So primarily the use cases centered around the need to establish trust in the data, that it's immutable and can't be changed after the fact. So
exactly.
Okay, great. So let's take this to a wrap. And I think one of the questions I typically ask guests who are kind of going through this transition from sales-led to product-led, what advice do you have for companies that are thinking about similar situations? And often when we talk to companies, they are introducing PLG as a additional model on top of their sales-led model. It's not usually one or the other. But regardless, like from your perspective, things that you've learned, tips and tricks, things to watch out for, what advice would you have?
Yeah. So PLG, like I mentioned earlier, it's not a silver bullet. If your product has kinks or whatever, it will expose those, because now you don't have the liberty of walking your customer through it. They're going to experience it for themselves and be happy or sad or annoyed, right? So that's something to keep in mind. Definitely work on the product experience itself, so it's easier to for the customer, and you want to reduce friction. Another thing too, like you rightfully said, PLG is not just something, at least in my experience, you just jump right into 100. So you were sales led, and now overnight you're PLG 100%. It's something you lean into, right? You can say maybe for 10%, 30%, for like, you can have thresholds for you to mature in the PLG space. And there are a bunch of checklists you can use for possible things you can do to be more PLG ready. If you looked it up online, there are quite a few. And I think the PLG, I forget what it's called, productled.com has a lot of resources on that, and there are quite a few entities doing similar. But that's the advice I'd give. I'd say focus on your customer experience, on your user experience for your product. Find some checklist that lets you walk through that, and also have realistic expectations that this does not just solve everything, right? You have to lean into it and scale in PLG over time, and run rapid experiments, because maybe PLG may not work for you. Surprise. So you need to be able to see that, right? And either lean in further with it, or figure out what works for your unique situation.
Got it. Great. One last thing. I know you have a hackathon on your website that you're inviting
Oh,
developers
yes.
to be a part of. You would like to share some information about that?
Yes, thank you so much for mentioning that. So we have a developer, a blockchain developers hackathon or challenge starting next week. It's on our website. You can link to it as well. So uledger.io/blockchain-developer-challenge. And the idea is for folks, developers who hungry to lean into the blockchain space, maybe have some Web3 experience, or maybe new to it, and want to lean in. We have this challenge going. It's going to be about a 3-week challenge. We have some fiat prices, so cash prices, and also even credits for access to our platform to build more things. So you're going to get hands-on experience, figure out some practical use cases for blockchain, and also the networking with other developers in similar, and an opportunity to connect with the ULedger crew. So folks have questions, can reach out to ask us, but it's right on our website to be able to sign up.
Anebi, thank you so much for your time, for sharing your journey, for sharing how you're driving this transition from sales-led to product-led. What's the best way for folks to reach out to you if they're interested in a further conversation?
So LinkedIn is my jam. I really love LinkedIn. Folks can connect with me on LinkedIn or send me messages there, but also my email is a good way to get in touch.
Awesome. Thank you again to the audience for joining us today. If you have any additional questions of Anebi, you can find him on LinkedIn. If you have questions for me or for Immersa, asim@immersa.co, pretty easy to get to. And we are prioritizing conversations with datapreneurs to better understand some of the challenges from a data standpoint. If there are people in your network that you'd like to hear from on this show, let me know, and we'd be happy to invite them and have conversations with.